Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining. We're going to get started in just a minute here. It'll allow some more folks to join. If you want, while we're waiting, you can pop into the chat your country where you're currently located. You have the chat feature. You can put where you're currently located. Okay, we have Iran, India, Germany, the UK, Istanbul. Welcome, Vietnam, Venezuela, Netherlands. Thank you all so much for joining. Ghana, excellent. Bangladesh, thank you so much for joining. Nigeria, Thailand, Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia. Fantastic. Thank you all so much for joining today. You may hear my air conditioning in the background in the US in the area we're located. I'm located about 15 minutes from the Lowell area. We're in a bit of a heat wave right now. So we've been having our air conditionings running to keep us nice and cool from the outside. So we are going to get started. My name is Emily Fritz. I am an advisor at the International Students and Scholars Office here at UMass Lowell. I also do some of the back end business development and process analysis, as well as some of the e-form and data components of an international office. So working within the application that we manage, which is called Synapsis. That's the fun tool that you've used to request for your visa document through UMass Lowell. And we are going to be talking about off-campus housing today. The reason that we try to focus on off-campus housing in this presentation is because on-campus, we have an on-campus housing office that's called the Residence Life Office. And they are fantastic with providing information about what the university offers for on-campus housing. And they can be reached at reslife@uml.edu. They also have a website that provides all of their deadlines and all of their protocols and information regarding the fall semester. So if you will be living on campus this semester, that is fantastic. It's a great way to learn and meet students, fellow students in your program that are also studying at UMass Lowell. And it's just a fun environment to be at, but this is also still going to be helpful just in case you ever want to transition to live off campus, which is pretty common. Sometimes students live on campus for part of their program, and then they may transition to off campus, or sometimes students live off campus the entire time that they are studying at the university. So it's really up to your preference. Okay, so today's agenda, we are going to be going over the different types of housing arrangements. We have temporary housing, which is really just focusing on getting you set up once you arrive to the US, versus more of that long-term stable housing that you're going to be living in for the next year or more. We'll also be talking about how to do a successful housing search in the United States in this area, what you need to consider when you're looking for housing, and what the rental process looks like in the United States. We'll then be going over just some general pre-arrival reminders, and then we'll have time at the end for a question and answer. I do want to just remind everybody, so we have the chat feature. That is a tool that you can use to say something that you want everyone to see. But the Q&A is going to be a feature where you can ask any questions. So if you have any questions, just pop them in the Q&A feature, and we'll be sure to answer them at the end of the webinar. All right, so I wanted to start by quickly just giving an introduction to the ISSO new international students section of the website, because we have so much excellent content on this site that I really want to bring everybody's attention to it. So in order to get to the important pre-arrival information, you just want to go to our website, uml.edu/ISSO. And from there, we have a lot of different things located on our website, but you can click on new international students, which is part of the drop down on the left-hand side navigation. And from there, you can click on pre-arrival and arrival information. That will then bring you to this lovely page here where there's a lot of information. You have the pre-arrival checklist. That gives you like the brief overview of what you really need to make sure to do before you arrive to the US. We then have the pre-arrival guide. That's like a 20-page guide that goes over some really great information, whether what the weather is going to be like in the United States, what you should pack, a lot of great off-campus housing and on-campus housing information, which will be important to students, getting your U card, getting your IT credentials set up, just a lot of important information for you to know. We then have resources about applying for a student visa, free airport transportation. We do provide airport transportation for our new international students as well. And then also those immunization requirements, a very important part of the onboarding and pre-arrival process. There's then a welcome guide that's available to you upon arrival, as well as orientation information. So this is really going to be your hub of resources for your pre-arrival/arrival process at UMass Lowell. And I wanted to put this on here because I will be referring to these resources throughout the webinar. So I wanted to just bring your attention to those. Okay. So before we dive into the off-campus housing information, I wanted to, well, I sort of have to go over a disclaimer here, which is that we don't have an official off-campus housing department. So while the ISSO or the university cannot really facilitate your off-campus housing arrangements, we do try to provide some general information for you just to educate you on the different types of housing and the different types of rental agencies that are available in the area. But with that said, we can't really advise you on, oh, this is a great place to live. This is a not so great place to live. So what we would say is that to just review the pre-arrival guide for a lot of those rental agencies. Those have not necessarily been approved and vetted by the university, but they are common places where some students and scholars may live in the local area. So again, it's important for you to do your own research and to look, with the internet nowadays and with Yelp and Google reviews, it's so easy to just do a quick search of rental agencies in the area and then see some reviews that other folks have left. That's always a good indicator, right? Just like if you're going out to dinner, you're going to lunch or something, and you want to see, is this a good place to go? Same thing with housing. There's just excellent resources available to us on the internet nowadays that it's a good idea to take advantage of those. So we, of course, have not, use your best judgment when looking for housing. We're going to be going over this information. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And you can also feel free to reach out to any of the student ambassadors as well that are available, that work with the OMA office and our office. So let's dive right in. There's a few differences between temporary accommodation and long-term housing. Okay, so the temporary accommodations are really for more of that short-term stay situation where you've come to the US, but you're not fully equipped for your long-term housing situation yet. Maybe you came to the US and you signed a lease that doesn't start until September 1st, but you arrive on August 14th, right? So you need somewhere to stay for those 2 weeks before you move into your actual off-campus housing situation. Or maybe you're doing that, but with the dorms. Um, so there are a lot of hotels and short-term vacation rentals in the Lowell area. We do have them listed in our pre-arrival guide. And again, that's on the new international student section of the website, the pre-arrival information. And the one thing to remember with short-term stay is that this can be very expensive, right? So you're staying in essentially a hotel, right? So it's going to be a little bit more money, of course, than if you were to just be moving right into your off-campus long-term housing arrangement. So be careful of that. There are a couple of hotels in the area that like specifically do the temporary, short-term stay type arrangements where that may be a little bit more affordable. But it's going to be important for you to do, to get a quote, to get an idea of how much that's going to cost you and make sure that that's going to work for you and your budget throughout the first couple of months here in the United States. Of course, just my advice would be, especially because of COVID-19, like it's so important to have these details figured out right before, as much as possible, right? There may be some things that just you're kind of gonna have to figure this out when you arrive, but when it comes down to housing, I would say you want to, as much as possible, you want to know where you're going to be staying, who you're going to be meeting, how are you getting from point A to point B. It's going to be very important to be as prepared as possible so that you can have a successful start of your experience in the United States. So be sure to do your research. If you're going to be staying in a more of a temporary accommodation, short-term stay type of situation, it's going to be important that you also consider food. Do you need a fridge? Are you planning on cooking? Do they have a cooking facility? Certain things like this. Otherwise, you're going to sort of required to be eating out a lot, and that can also be very expensive. And also consider transportation, where if you need to go get groceries, how can you get from that location to go get groceries? And we're going to be talking about location a little bit further down in the presentation. The long-term housing, of course, is going to be your traditional apartment rentals. If you're going to be, I've spoken to a couple of students who they have family members in the Lowell area. They already have plans to live with them in the Lowell area. So this is more of your long-term, this is what you're going to be doing for the year or for 6 months, however long it's going to be for your time in the United States. We do have a lot of rental agencies and off-campus housing information in the pre-arrival guide, so be sure to review that. And it is located on page 6 of the pre-arrival guide. We do have the OMA ambassadors. Their information is posted also on the pre-arrival guide. So if you'd like to reach out to them for some information, about whether maybe there's, some students, there's 3 students living in a 4-bedroom apartment right now, and they're looking for a roommate, right? So that's also a good way to connect with students to be like, okay, are there any openings for roommates? If you know that you want to be paying a little bit less by having more roommates, but you don't actually know anybody yet, that may be a good way to sort of ask them for their opinion to see if they're looking for any roommates. I also want to say that this is not endorsed by the university, but there usually is like a couple of like Facebook groups that are not run by the university. They're run by the students at UMass Lowell, where some of this information is discussed. So it's sort of like there are groups where you can ask, okay, we have a subletting room available for this much amount per week, right? Or per month. So some of those things that are not officially endorsed by the university, but the students run it themselves. And that's a great way to just kind of, as a student, you have to, of course, know your risk, accept your risk, because it's not endorsed by anybody. But, it is a helpful resource to have when you want to just connect with other students and kind of see what's going on. So beginning your housing search. When can I begin my housing hunt? Now. Right now is the perfect time to be looking for housing if you haven't already. This is a common time to be looking for housing because some people may be moving to the area um, to start there, to start going to the local public school system. A lot of like schools in the United States start in September. So there's probably going to be limited inventory the closer that we get to September. So the best time to be looking is definitely right now so that you can get the best rate and the best options before there's limited inventory. So be sure to start your housing plans as soon as possible. If possible, it is best to see the housing options in person. That's not always going to be possible, right? If you're outside of the US, which most, if not all of you are, that's perfectly okay. You may have a plan to live temporarily, with a friend or live in a short-term vacation rental while you look for more suitable housing. That's okay as well. But you may have somebody in the area that that maybe you can send to check out a place on your behalf. That's also a great thing. Or if you're going to be living with roommates, then you already kind of know that they're already in the space. They're checking out the space. They can send you some pictures, maybe like that. You can always contact the landlords. The landlords are the folks that actually own the building and that you'll be paying rent to. And you can always contact them by email or phone about any of the properties. And you generally have to submit an application to that landlord and provide some information, which we're going to be going over. And I do want to just make a shout out here to scams. I know I have it somewhere in the presentation, but I want to say it because we're kind of talking about it now. Be careful of scams. Apparently the scams have been wicked on the rise too because of COVID-19 and because, people couldn't really see things in person. There was no like in-person connection. And we just would want you to be as careful as possible. Never wire any money, never give any money unless it's a trusted situation. And, you can always ask us for any opinion, but of course, never, ever, regardless of the situation, ever give cash because cash you can't track down cash, right? So if you say, oh, I gave somebody $500 cash, unless you got a receipt for that, there's no way to verify that you actually did that. So a check or some type of payment that can be tracked would be ideal. But be careful when you're looking for housing. Sometimes even if you go, if you're on an app or something looking for housing, a good way to see if something may not be legitimate is if you see multiple postings which don't match up. You have like one posting it's all the same pictures. Some are like let's say one is for 2,000 a month, another is for 800 a month, but they're all the same pictures, right? So something's looking a little strange because there's multiple postings, there's different prices, and it's just not looking good. So be wary of those posts. And then also, if something looks too good to be true, it may be a scam. So if it says, oh, $200 for an apartment, absolutely, there's no way you're going to be living, even if you have a roommate, there's no way that you'll be paying $200 a month. So that's an easy identifier. Oh, that's a scam. Something's not right there. So just be careful because there are people out there that are trying to take advantage of folks. So we're going to be talking about what you need to consider for off-campus housing, location, transportation, amenities, utilities, you name it, we'll be going over it. So location is one of the most important factors when you're finding off-campus housing. And you want to consider the safety of the location. There's generally, there's even like Crime Watch websites that are available that you can do a little bit of research on to see, how is this area looking? And You can also, I would say the important part about location is how are you going to get from point A to point B, right? So if you found this excellent housing arrangement, this excellent apartment, but it happens to be 5 miles from campus. Okay, how are you going to be getting from that apartment to campus? And what campus are you taking your classes on? We have a few campuses at UMass Lowell. So we have South Campus, which is more for our fine arts and humanities, as well as health and social sciences, and music. And then we also have North Campus. That's for our business majors, our STEM majors. So how far is it from where you're actually going to be taking classes on campus? And how are you going to be getting from that housing to the campus? So for instance, if you're planning on, maybe riding a bike, okay, are there bike lanes in that area? And even though that may be suitable for the warmer months, so September and October, and maybe even part of November, you may be able to do that. But once December, January, February hit in the United States and in this area, we will be getting snow. And once there's snow, the sidewalks and the streets, often because of the plows, a large section is often blocked off. So that may not be suitable for the later months, for the winter months. So it's going to be important for you to pick something, unless you're planning on getting a car, fairly close to campus that you can, I'd say a mile or, maybe no more, unless you're going to be getting a car, because it's going to be difficult to get around in the winter. I remember those days like trucking to my campus. And, it's icy, it's a little bit difficult. So how close is this apartment to public transportation? Does public transportation run on? Does it have a route very close to where you're going to be living? If so, what do you need to do to get those arrangements? And what are the times that they're going to be running? Is it going to be more difficult, or is it going to be feasible for you to be taking public transportation to the campus? And just remember that if you are going to be bringing any dependents with you, that it's important to also consider, are those dependents, do you have a child, or do you have children that you're bringing that are going to be placed in the local school system? Where is the location of that school system? And how are they going to be getting from that apartment to the local school system? And, is this a family-friendly area that you're looking at? Transportation, we just talked about that. If you have a car, then that's great. You want to kind of consider parking on campus. But certainly it may be you may not have as many challenges if you're going to be living far away and you don't have a car, right? So if you don't have a car, which is most students don't have a car, right, on campus, then you want to look at the different options, which are the LRTA. The LRTA is the public transportation in the Lowell area. We also have the university shuttle, which the university shuttle is going from campus to campus. And they also have routes on the weekends to the Drum Hill area, which is the shopping area, a shopping center. If you're going to be taking a bicycle, the university also offers a bike share program, so you may be able to borrow a bike to get from one campus to the next. So just keep in mind that, of course, COVID-19 could impact that local transportation. So just you want to plan accordingly. And then also just consider that extreme weather. Definitely, it's going to be easier, and it's going to be more of a student experience. This is my humble opinion here. If you are going to be closer to campus, nobody wants to be miles and miles away from campus because it's hard to get there. You want to be like immersed into the student experience. You want to be meeting people. You want to be having fun. You don't want things to be more difficult by choosing a place that's further away, just because it may be a little bit more affordable. It may pose some challenges throughout the winter months. So amenities. Some properties may include some in unit washing machines, or dishwashing machines, some kitchen, some like cool kitchen appliances. Is there, if you're going to be having a car, is there parking? What kind of parking is there? Is there a driveway? Is there on street parking? Is there a lot that you can park on? Does your place offer cable TV, or is that something that you would need to be purchasing? Is it furnished or unfurnished? So are you planning on buying all of the different furnishings for the apartment, et cetera? So really the amenities are going to differ based on the place that you're going to be looking at, right? So it could narrow down your search a little bit. So really only include amenities that are essential. To be honest, most of us have Netflix nowadays, Hulu, Showtime, whatever it may be, some streaming services, YouTube TV. So something like cable TV may not be a big deal to you, right? You may already have that type of stuff. So be conscientious of that. I would say that if you're looking sort of like in the campus area, I would think that most units will not have in-unit washing machines, but there's local laundromats that are fairly close. So that may be an option for you as well. So think of utilities, because in the US, you may have, let's say there's a 2-bedroom apartment that's available for $1,400 in the Lowell area, right? So that's kind of your base rent for per month, right? You want to know what that includes. Does it include parking? Does it not include parking, etc.? But also you want to be sure to factor in those utilities. So utilities in the United States are going to be your electric or your gas. So how is the house cooled? Is it cooled by maybe like in-unit ACs? And that may not be so much of an issue when you're here in September, because it's going to start to get cool, but it will be important. You're going to want to know how the house is heated, because once it starts to get to November 1st, December, January, you're going to need to have heat. So how much is heat per month? Is it electric heat or is it gas heat? Who pays for water? Some off-campus housing or off-campus rentals will include hot water. Some will include heat. So you know that is a price that's already factored into that $1,400. If it's not, then you will need to expect that you're going to be paying X amount in also utilities. And you can always ask, like, what's the range for utilities, per month in this, I'm just trying to, balance my budget and be able to prepare. You can always ask your landlord something like that. And then also garbage pickup, that's generally included in the fee as well. Okay, so financials. So average rents in Lowell are about $1,500. To be honest, the pandemic has really just spiked cost for a lot of things in this area. And it may be true for your home country as well. But definitely be ready to pay a good amount of money per month to be living off campus. If you're going to be living with other students, that amount is going to go significantly down. So, you may be looking at like a 2-bedroom for $1,500 where you'll have 3 roommate, or you'll have 1 other roommate. So that cost is going to be divided in half, right? Or maybe it's a $1,500 for a 3-bedroom. So it's only $500 per month for each of you, but then you need to worry about utilities and the added expenses and whatnot. Of course, the more roommates you have, the less you're sort of going to be paying. With some, use your judgment there. Of course, you don't want to be having too many people in a place where that's not really permitted. So you will, when you apply for your initial I-20 or DS 2019, because I know we have some J1 students here, you were required to provide financial documentation. And that's the financial documentation that you said that you were going to be relying on for the first year, at least, of your program at UMass Lowell. So that's going to be what the U.S. Embassy is going to be looking for when you go to apply for that visa. And, just remember that's going to be that's the financial documentation that you showed for your living expenses. That's what's going to be paying for your off campus, or maybe you're living on campus. That's what's going to be paying for those expenses or covering those expenses, right? While there's options for on-campus employment when you arrive to the US and when you arrive to campus, you should not rely on that for any type of living expenses, because those living expenses, again, that's going to go back to the financial documentation that you showed when you applied for your I-20 or DS 2019, and when you're applying for your visa at the US Embassy. So that on-campus employment, if you're able to get an on-campus job, that can be kind of supplementary, for you to like go out to eat once a week or something like that. It shouldn't be really relied on for those key expenses that you're going to accrue. We do have a money management resource page under the financial section of our website, which is a great resource that I recommend students to check out. So now we're going to be talking about the process, what documentation you need, sort of, if there's any roadblocks, what could they potentially be, and then some resources as well. So in order to rent an apartment, you will need to show that you're enrolled. So you'll want to go to your Student Information Center, that SIS navigation, your self-service, and just print a copy of your transcript perhaps, or go and you can also, from your student self-service within SIS, you can print an enrollment verification, which is like a quick one pager that just says your name, and it shows, it reflects that you're enrolled full-time. So if you're not yet enrolled, but you plan to be living off campus and renting an apartment, you're going to want to enroll as soon as possible. You will also need to show some type of evidence that you have the funds to pay rent, right? So this could be maybe a bank statement. Maybe if you have a loan, then you have like the official loan letter, which it provides the information of your resources, of the money that you get and at what point you get them. So those are two options that you can certainly provide to your landlord. Just make sure that there's no confidential information on there. A name and a total is totally fine. For the fees in the US, they do require, most of the time, I've never lived in an apartment that didn't, a security deposit, and that is usually up to 1 month's rent. So if, like, again, let's go back to that example of the $1,500 for a 3-bedroom. If you're paying $500 per month, it depends on how sort of the landlord does it. If you're each of you, there's 3 roommates, so each of you have your own lease, or whether it's one lease that everybody signs. And if somebody's unable to pay the rent, then you and the other 2 roommates need to come up with the difference. Be aware of that. Or if it's going to be everybody has their own lease, so each person is responsible for paying $500 individually to the landlord. I lived in both arrangements, so it's going to be up to the landlord to let you know what the policies and procedures are with that. So you would need to pay, in this case, it would be $500 each, or it would be $1,500 for, from the total from the 3 of you. That is to cover any type of damages that could be done to the place. And then at the end, when you're moving out, they would provide you back with that security deposit. And if they did not provide you with the security deposit, then they would need to provide documentation to you as to why they're keeping a certain amount of money and what those damages actually are. The broker fee, which can be up to 1 month's rent as well, you may see that. It's more common to see security deposit. That's kind of the language that folks are using. And at times they may also, like when you're renting an apartment, they would require, first month's rent or last month's rent as well. And that's just to make sure that, you're paying a lump sum at the beginning to show that you have the funds. But it's not typical to be paying the entire year or the entire lease in advance. You would normally pay it month to month. So rental fees can be anywhere from $800 to $1,800 per month. That's excluding the utilities, your gas, your electricity, your telephone service. Again, you're going to be looking this stuff up, so you'll kind of be a little bit more educated on what the prices are right now. But just again, keep in mind that if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. Again, if you're going to be having roommates, those total costs will be reduced significantly. And keep in mind that when you apply to live, when you fill out like that rental application, some rental agencies do require like a $50 rental application fee, or $25 or $30, $75, things like that. So that could be an additional cost as well. So the rental application is a form that helps the property owners determine, who you are and your eligibility to live in their house. And so they would normally ask for information like your name, your biographical details, how you will be paying for the rent, etc. The form will definitely be it may have a spot where it's asking for your SSN, but it's just an application. So I would say it may not be required, but a lot of students will not have an SSN just yet. So that's okay. You can just explain to your landlord that you don't have an SSN just yet. International students are not required to have an SSN unless they're going to be working on campus. So your lease is the actual contract that's going to be outlining the terms and conditions of your agreement with the landlord. And so this can be, a couple pages, it can be more than that, but that's going to be outlining, what's the requirements and what are the agreements between you and the landlord. Traditionally, the lease is a minimum of 9 months or 12 months. That 12 months is pretty common. Sometimes you may see a 9-month lease. That's not as common, but traditionally speaking, it's usually a 1-year lease, and they do require that you sign on for at least 1 year. So if you're planning on staying here for less than that, it's going to get a little bit more tricky to get into an apartment. What I will say is that sometimes students do like subletting, or one person signs the lease but not everybody's on the lease. That can get you in trouble, because you want everything to be official. You don't want something to happen if you get in a fight with a friend, and then that friend is saying, okay, now you need to move out or something, and there's no record of you on that lease. You really want to have everything official. The landlord should know everybody that's living in that house, because that's why you have that lease. So you don't want to get in any trouble with the rental agency or the landlord, or just the system at all. So just be careful, and definitely you want things to be as official as possible for everyone to be on the lease. And again, be careful of those cash payments. You never want to give the cash payment. So beware of scams. I've mentioned this already. If something looks not right, something looks too good to be true, there's a reason that's a saying. It probably is too good to be true. Be careful of any offers that want money, a substantial like payment, or they're asking for a payment in an untraditional way, before actually seeing the place, before knowing that this is a place that you could actually rent out. If you can't see the place, you can also ask the landlord to do a walkthrough of the space with you on FaceTime, or maybe on Skype, or any other service that you can see the video. Make sure to do some research on the property. Are there listings that have similar pictures with different contact information? So that's what I was saying before. If you go on, if you're using like a search engine, and all of a sudden you see a bunch of different places that have all have the same pictures, but there's different prices, there's different contact information, that's a sign right now that that's definitely looking to be a scam. Don't wire any money. Always get receipts for your payments. And again, like, don't take your time. I feel like scammers, they're very skilled at what they do. And part of the reason that they get away with what they're doing is because they apply that pressure to be like, this is urgent, you need to do it now. We have someone else and we're gonna give it to them. And they're applying that pressure because they want you to give them the money and then they're gone, right? So be careful with that. Be cautious. You always have time to make a decision. You don't want to be rushed into something. So there are some possible roadblocks in getting an off-campus housing apartment. Some places will be okay with the fact that you're an international student and that you don't have like a credit history, right? Or maybe they're asking for, your parents' information and your parents don't live in the United States. So it can be a little tricky. But there are a lot of great landlords in the area that are understanding to that and that are just more understanding to students in general. Because students may not have a credit history either, right? They may not have ever had a credit card in the United States. So they really don't have that as somebody who is maybe a little bit older, who's been working and has built their credit history over the years. So it's not necessarily a bad thing if you don't have a credit history. That credit history is just, again, it's tied to your social security number. It's showing your financial patterns, whether you've paid your bills on time, whether you have a lot of debt, your debt to income ratio, et cetera. So it's not really a bad thing, but some landlords do require some type of credit history in order for you to be an approved leasee. So you do want to have an indication of what the requirements are to be living for that lease and for that landlord. You can get around this by, having some other type of proof of income to demonstrate that you do have the ability to pay your rent on time and you have the funds and that won't be an issue. If you do live on campus or you have an assistantship, you can always provide, your your offer letter that shows that this is the amount that you will be making for the semester, and that can also work. Landlords are pretty flexible with that. The lease application or the lease in general will ask for the social security number, which many students will not have yet. So that's okay. You're not eligible to apply for a social security number unless you have an on-campus job offer. So you don't want to depend on that SSN to get housing, and you don't have to. You don't need to have a social security number. But because sometimes landlords do actually deny students for not having an SSN. But there is some resources. You can always go back to them and say, as an F1 student, I cannot, or J1 student, I cannot have a social security number. And, there may be a possibility for you to work something out with the landlord individually. So we have some helpful resources here, which is just the mass.gov resource page, which has information about what your rights are and what's typical, what's required about renting in Massachusetts. If you have to file some type of complaint, which hopefully you don't, that's where you can go for information. There's a lot of rules and regulations that involve housing in the United States and in Massachusetts as well. So there's also requirements that the tenants need to follow, as well as the landlords. And there's housing consumer education centers. There's a mediation program if it ever came down to that. So that's a really great resource. Hopefully you don't have any issues, so you won't have to necessarily use any of those mediation programs, but the tenant rights and responsibilities are very important. And I would say to go ahead and check them out. Again, the pre-arrival has a lot of great information for housing search engines, how to look for, where to look for housing, realtor contact information, some of the rental agencies in the area, and as well as that short-term temporary accommodation. So the hotels, the short-term stays, etc. You can also reach out to any of the cultural clubs for information on, if you want to ask them, what's your opinion? I'm looking at this apartment. How does this look? That's not, of course, approved by the university, but it's a good way to kind of already meet some people and to reach out to maybe the OMA ambassadors for some information and for some advice. And the student clubs, we have a lot of student clubs. Actually, I think we have over like 100 clubs on campus. And we have many like faith clubs, as well as cultural clubs, and, sports activities, academic clubs, you name it, we have it. The Indian Student Association is a very big club on campus. We have the Turkish Student Association. So the Chinese Student Association, we have a lot of fantastic clubs on campus, and these are great resources to have to reach out to. Again, you can always reach out to the cultural clubs on Engage, and that information can be found on the OMA website as well. Again, we have also the Iranian Student Association, Pakistani Student Association, so many great clubs on campus, and they would be more than willing to help you with any information. The UML Black Market page on Facebook, that's again, of course, not endorsed by the university, not endorsed by me, but this is the sort of like unofficial place where students can go and talk with other students about, if there's rooms that are being sublet, things for sale, maybe books for sale, etc. So I'm going to be going over a couple of reminders, and then we'll afterwards we'll take some we'll go to the Q&A section. So pop any questions that you may have in the Q&A now. If you already put your question in there, I will get to it after this slide. So as a reminder, we have the new Student Success Summit. So that is going to be the orientation program that's available for students, and it is required that you attend. During the Student Success Summit, we will be having the ISSO immigration clearance session. So you absolutely have to be at the Student Success Summit. Some of those will be virtual sessions. The ISSO session will be virtual if you're unable to get to the US before August 24th. That's totally fine. And the graduate student orientation will also be part of the new Student Success Summit. So that's going to be your one and only orientation for the grad students, unless you also have an additional orientation for like an RITA situation. For undergrad students, you want to plan to attend both the new Student Success Summit and whatever undergraduate student orientation you need to attend. There's usually the undergrad admissions office does their orientations by department. So you would go like by college. So if you were in the science program, you would go to the orientation for sciences, or if you were a fine arts and humanities, you would go to that orientation. So again, undergrads, you're going to both the undergrad student orientation. You want to register for that as soon as possible because they're currently being held, as well as that Student Success Summit. We do have the link to register for that on our website on the pre-arrival section. You'll see OMA Student Success Summit. You're going to want to click on that to register for that as soon as possible. Be sure to create an account with your student health portal and to upload and to complete any forms for your immunizations. This is absolutely very important because that is a requirement to study at UMass Lowell. And we are also requiring the COVID-19 vaccine. If you have not been vaccinated and that's okay, you can plan to get vaccinated in your home country. You just wouldn't want to be like half vaccinated by the time you signed up. So if you know that you won't be able to be fully vaccinated in your home country with a vaccination that's been approved by the World Health Organization, then you would not want to be like partially vaccinated. You would just want to wait until you arrive to the US, unless you can get fully vaccinated before your arrival to the US. So we will be having more information on that sent to students so that they know upon arrival, here's what you need to do if you're not vaccinated. If you're already vaccinated, go ahead and sign up for the student health portal, fill out the forms, provide the documentation for your immunizations as well as the COVID-19 vaccine. September 1st is the start of classes. Don't forget about that. All students should be in the US by then. If you're not able to get here because of visa issues, you're going to want to work with your department and also let ISSO know so that we can work with you. And then finally, we do offer airport transportation free pickup between the month of August. So you can register for that on the ISSO website. Again, that's going to be linked from the pre-arrival and arrival section of the website. So I know I just said a lot of information. So I'm going to be taking some questions at this time. So feel free to put any questions in that Q&A function. Yes, this is going to be recorded and it will be posted on our website. And we can also share a copy of the slides, yes. Okay, so what is the easiest way to pay rent from a different country? That is a good question. And to be honest, I'm not sure that I can answer that. Because you wouldn't necessarily have like a check. And I would say that you would want to contact the agency or the landlord for information on that. Because you really, to be honest, it's not ideal to be paying I mean, maybe they accept credit cards, but I wouldn't want you to be paying an agency or a landlord without, proof that you actually upon arrival are going to have a place to stay. And this is not a scam. So I would be very careful and cautious of any scams. Could you provide me any feedback on the following off-campus housing? I wouldn't be able to necessarily provide feedback on any off-campus housings just because of that, disclaimer. I can't really provide any information on that. Thing, but it looks like you're I see the Edge, so Merrimack Edge. That is a place that's pretty close to campus. And there should be reviews if you look up to see if there's any student reviews. And that's also a great question that you can put in maybe in the Facebook Black Market page if you want to speak to any students, fellow students with their experience to see what they're saying. Or you can reach out to the OMA ambassadors or the cultural clubs for any input on that as well. Are landlords put off if the renter is an international student? No, not necessarily. As long as your landlord is open to renting to students, like some landlords don't even want to rent to any students, right? They want more of like, a professional that's working. And that's because, maybe they just want somebody that's a little bit older, that's not going to be having a lot of friends over or whatever it may be. Maybe they've had a bad experience in the past. So as long as your landlord is open to renting to students, you should be fine. But that social security number issue may come into play, but you would be able to provide additional documentation at that point. I've seen places that are saying that you need 3 times the cost of the rent per month to be accepted to live there. Do you mean this is from our earnings, i.e. stipend, or can it be from our savings? So I'm assuming that's probably like you need first month's rent, first and last. Usually that's what it's called, first and last, and a security deposit. So that is pretty traditional. So you would need to, so again, don't be wiring any money or giving any money until you've really seen a place that may be trickier, unless you know somebody that currently lives there. So I would say that you can, so I mean, you're able to show that type of funds. Yeah, you could show it in your stipend. You can also ask your landlord, like, okay, like, how would you prefer me to show that? Usually what they want is not only proof that you have it, but they want actually the money, at the time that you're signing the lease. So that can be a little bit challenging if you're outside of the US, but you would need to show generally first and last and your security deposit as well. Do you recommend I pay for the apartment on arrival, considering the prevalent scam and fraud issues? Meanwhile, I have nowhere to stay on arrival after leaving the airport, considering my budget. Kindly advise. So my recommendation would be, so if you're going to be living off campus, the challenges are going to be a little bit greater, right? So if I would say that maybe consider living on campus, specifically because you're going to meet more people, and because the on-campus department is the residence life department is also offering students to move in early. So you're able to move in early right from the airport. You would coordinate that with the on-campus housing department. You won't have to worry about, okay, is this a scam? Do I need to sign a lease, etc. To be honest, I lived on campus my first 2 years, and I met so many people I would not have met the amount of people that I met if I had lived off campus. So in your first couple of years, it may be a good idea for you to live on campus because of the challenges that can pursue when you're trying to find off campus as a new student. That can be very challenging, and you also don't want to be taken advantage of. So, you may want to consider living on campus because it's just a little bit less difficult when it comes to paying the fees, etc. Hello, I am a fully funded international graduate student. Can I show my offer letter to my landlord as proof to secure my apartment pending the time I have money to pay? You'll have to work that out with your landlord. You can show proof that you have the funding available and that you will be getting a paycheck, right? So they would want like proof of employment, so you could show that to them. And see if you would be able to pay upon arrival. Just due to scams, you're trying to be a little bit more weary of that. You could definitely ask them that. It's going to be also up to the landlord, right? So I can't really answer on behalf of the landlord. Our graduate students, TAs, teaching assistants, required to have an SSN. You're not required to have an SSN right now, but upon arrival, we will help you to get your SSN so that you have one. But you may not have an SSN if you're filling out an application to live off campus just at that point just yet, because it takes a few weeks to get an SSN. I have a few ads in which the agent landlord was asking for the necessity of an income, which is 3 times as much as the rent. How common is this? Yeah, so I mean, the landlord wants to make sure that you have substantial funds to live and to be able to pay your rent. So if they're asking, usually I'm not sure if you mean like per month, or if you're asking that they're asking for like first and last and security. That's pretty common, where they're asking for first, last, security. And so yes, that is common that they would ask for first, last, and security. Per month. So I mean, I would show them, if you have financial resources, if you're getting like, if you have a loan, right, or a scholarship where you get $5,000 a month, then you could show something like that and be like, this is the money that I have. I remember my first apartment, I didn't have I didn't have an income, right? But the landlord was willing to rent to me because I was able to show that, I have a scholarship and I get X amount per month. So that can also be helpful. I am planning to spend a few days at a friend's house upon arrival. Can I still request the free airport transportation from Logan to Lowell without a flight? I guess I'm confused by that question, because I'm wondering like how you'd be at the airport without a flight. But feel free to email ISSO and we can definitely chat about that. I didn't receive my UML ID yet, so I have no access to Health Porter. How do I upload my health insurance? You definitely want to email or reach out to the IT help desk to get that UML email as soon as possible so that you can access the health portal. And there is a video on the health portal website that explains how to upload those. Is a distance of 1 mile from UMass North Campus a decent distance and can be considered for off-campus housing? What is your opinion? It depends. Like, are you willing to walk that far? I would even go onto Google Maps and see how long the route is, how the walking is. You can even do a street view to see how good it is, and how active you are, right? A mile may not be a big deal, but it may be a big deal to people that don't want to walk a mile per month, per trip. Okay. Is there a lease for at least 1 month? It's very hard to find, very hard to find. It's usually 12 months or 9 months. What's the orientation date for grad students? It's part of the Student Success Summit, August 24th to August 26th. It's on the 25th during the Student Success Summit. So you'll go to the Student Success Summit, and from there you will then go to your graduate orientation. There'll be a session that they'll just escort you to that as well. Sorry, that's my dog in the background. I will go to UML and planning to stay off campus with my spouse. Is it possible for us to use the airport transportation service? Yes, absolutely. That's perfectly fine. Of course, absolutely. My flight is in New York. Is there transportation service from JFK? There is not transportation. That's pretty far away, to be honest, driving. So you may want to figure out how you're going to get from JFK, or you may want to see if you can actually get a connecting flight from JFK to Logan, because if you have a lot of like bags, that's going to be hard to get from JFK to the Lowell area. So maybe see if you can get a flight from JFK to Logan International. I will not be able to take my COVID vaccine before I come to the US. It was mentioned that COVID vaccine will be given after we report to the college. Will I be able to attend classes without being fully vaccinated? So we will have a process. So if you're not fully vaccinated, you will need to fill out a form to request a temporary exemption to allow you to go to classes. This will only be available if you report your arrival to the US and if you already confirm that you have an appointment to get your vaccine. Those details are not really ironed out just yet. The form's not yet available, but we will be providing more information through the month of July and as it gets closer to August. So don't worry too much. We will be here to support you and to give you the resources you need to get that vaccine, and then to also be sure that you can attend classes safely, okay? Should I arrive? When should I arrive if I want to check properties in person? The earliest you can arrive would be 30 days prior to the start date listed on your I-20 or DS 2019. So you may want to consider that. And if you aren't going to be having off-campus housing already situated, then you would need to look into having short-term accommodations. How do I register for on-campus housing? You would want to go to the housing office website or contact the Residence Life office, and they are very responsive and very helpful. So they can definitely support you with that. Let's see. Is it mandatory to attend orientation between 24th and 26th in person? Most of the sessions will be virtual, so you should be able to attend those without any issue. Okay, so we are getting more and more questions. We are going to have to wrap up in just a couple of minutes. If I didn't get a chance to answer your question, then you can certainly email us at ISSO@uml.edu or international@uml.edu, and we'll be sure to answer any questions that you may have. Can UMass Lowell help international students with housing like 2 to 3 days before they get their apartment? The challenge at this time is high for international students. So we do have a list of temporary accommodations that, in the local area. The university is more than willing to, the housing office is more than willing to accommodate short-term stays, but traditionally you would, in order to qualify, you would need to have a housing contract, because you also need to go through that process of filling out the relevant forms to live on campus. So it would be a lot of work and logistics if you weren't planning to live on campus in the fall. So I would say you may want to look into living on campus in the fall, and that way you can also move in early. It's going to be a lot of less back and forth in logistics if you live on campus. To be honest, you're going to be safe. You know that you can move in early, you can go right there to check in. So if it's going to be more challenging to live off campus, that's definitely for sure, especially in your first year. That's why usually in the first or second year, we'd always recommend to live on campus. May PhD students live in the dorms? Do they? Yep. definitely graduate students can live in the dorms for sure. Let's see here. We'll take just a couple more questions. It looks like we have some questions on the COVID-19. Do I need to be in quarantine after arriving to Lowell? That's up to a lot of different resources. It's up to the state of Massachusetts. Right now, if you're fully vaccinated, you may not need to quarantine. However, you want to kind of prepare just and be flexible just in case things change. The CDC guidance is constantly changing, so you will want to check out that information. We will be sending out further information on requirements, quarantine, and information for students as well. Okay, so if you have any further questions, we do have to wrap up at this time. So if you can send an email to ISSO or international@uml.edu, and we'll be happy to work with you or set up a Zoom appointment to meet with you. We have advising hours this week, so please let us know. Thank you everybody for joining. I very much appreciate you being here today. I look forward to meeting you on campus in the fall, and great questions today. Thank you all so much. Take care. Bye.